When I finished my undergrad a couple of years ago, I knew that meant that I had freedom from all of the homework, the research, and all the readings that I had to do to write my papers. I had taken high-level courses throughout all of high school and immediately jumped into a 4-year university once I finished high school. So of course I was burnt out from all of the reading, and just reading in general. Reading for pleasure, reading for fun seemed like a distant memory to me from elementary. And because I was studying English in university, that meant that I had to read a lot of literature. I kid you not, there were times where I had to read novels. That's novels with an S, plural, multiple books within the same week. So when I wrapped up my schooling, the last thing I wanted to do was pick up another book. And I think that's how a lot of the general population feels when it comes to reading. Let's get real for a moment. Here are some of the stats that I pulled from Literacy Inc. 56% of young people claim that they have read fewer than 10 books in a year. 50% of adults in the United States are unable to read a book at an 8th grade level. 33% of the high school graduates here in the United States never pick up a book and read it after they've graduated. And this one just doesn't even sound real to me. 70% of adults have not been in a bookstore in the past 5 years. Look, when it comes to the United States, it's no secret that most people don't spend their free time reading books. And it's even worse when you look at it from just the male perspective. According to the National Endowment for the Arts, roughly 1 in 4 men read a novel or short story in 2022, compared with fewer than half of all women. The truth is, most adults just aren't reading enough. And then when you look at it from just the male side, men are reading even less than women are. Okay, so most people aren't reading books. What's the big deal? I am a very biased source here because I am a high school English teacher, so of course I'm going to be promoting reading books. An English teacher telling people to read books is like Tim Cook telling people to buy Apple products. Of course that's what they're going to do. But throughout my last few years as a teacher, ironically, I had to find out how to fall in love with reading again. But once I did, I was reminded why it was so important. I've mentioned before that I've been working on my Spanish lately because it is my native language, but as I went to school for so long studying English, my Spanish literacy started to fade a little bit, and I've been working on sharpening that pencil over the last couple of months. So I've just been doing more things in Spanish. I think that's the easiest way to practice a language that you already have a good grasp on, is just do more things in that language. I'm a big wrestling fan, so I just started watching some more lucha libre. It's the wrestling of my people. Mostly I've been watching the Consejo Mundial de Lucha Libre, but I've also been watching a little bit of AAA, and just hearing other people speak Spanish, watching things in Spanish, watching movies and TV shows in Spanish, it just helps your ear train itself to recognize speech patterns that maybe you won't pick up from reading things in a book or studying things on paper. Now, the books are still great. I plan on getting through this book in Spanish, Sabrina y Corina, and making a big dent on it over the next couple of days. Just again, to practice that literacy. Reading is such a great thing that we are able to do as human beings. Why would we limit ourselves by not doing that great thing? One thing that I like to do when I read is throw on a little bit of instrumental music into the background. Sometimes it's jazz, sometimes it's classical, but I like to throw this music on in the background to really immerse myself and make me feel like I'm almost part of a movie, and this is the movie soundtrack that's going on as I'm reading through my books. Lucky for me and lucky for all of the beautiful people watching this video, Vinyl.com has come through with a discount code for you guys to use when you check out on their website. If you use the discount code EDDY10, that's EDDY10, you get to save 10% off of your order when you're buying CDs, records, all kinds of music, and you know how much I love my physical copies of music. From Vinyl.com, I was able to pick up Imaginal Disc from Magdalena Bay on CD, load this bad boy up onto my iPod, and then I also picked up this grail that I've been searching for so long, is Third Eye Blind on vinyl. You know how hard I've been searching for this thing for the last couple of years, and all I had to do with Vinyl.com was type in the album name, boom, found it within minutes. So if you're a music lover like me, or you just want to try out listening to music the way that I do to immerse myself into a reading, go ahead and check out Vinyl.com and use my discount code, because in this economy, 10% can go a long way. As a high school English teacher, a lot of my class revolves around books. And I remember when we would go to the school library for students to check out their books, I would get a lot of students asking me for recommendations on books that I think that they should read. And this question would often stump me after I finished listing off the handful of young adult novels that I knew teenagers would like. I realized I wasn't as well read as I thought I was. The only books I had really read were the books that I needed to read for class while I was in school. And a lot of the times, I was reading those books on a deadline, meaning I didn't read them for fun or for leisure or to pass the time. I was reading them to pass the class. That's when I decided I needed to start reading for fun again. But I understand that reading isn't the easiest thing for everyone to do right now. We've spent decades with screens in our face, And it's so hard to convince yourself once you're used to those screens to put those screens down and replace them with the book instead. But why should I do that in the first place? Why? What makes reading so valuable? Again, my bias might be showing here, but your teachers weren't lying to you when you were in school. Reading is one of the best things you can do for your brain. But reading forces you to put pictures in your head. Reading forces you to take the information from the page and make associations with people or characters or places or things and put them into your head. Your brain's doing 100% of the work. It's reading the words, it's understanding what those words mean, it's forming images in your head to help you understand what is being said, slight bars. It builds your vocabulary and your literacy. And let's just keep it a buck right now. Most of us, our reading is coming from social media posts right now. And a lot of the time, the reading is coming from the comments on those social media posts. And there's often typos, incorrect grammar. Sometimes they're not even using the correct words, there's abbreviations. It's this newspeak language that we were warned about. I've had students turn in papers where they wrote every single part of their essay as if they were texting their friend using these abbreviations, using these acronyms, and they didn't realize that they were doing anything wrong because this is the way that the youth has seen language their entire life. And probably the most underrated and most important part about reading is that it keeps you off of your freaking phone, man. Doom scrolling is killing our attention span. Doom scrolling is killing our intelligence. We all know this, but yet we don't do enough to stop ourselves from doing it. Well, with reading, the pages only move as fast as you let them. You can read the same thing over and over again and suddenly you're understanding things that you didn't understand the first time or the last time that you read that book. If you're reading nonfiction, you might read something important, you might learn something important, learn some facts. And if you're reading fiction, you might learn to empathize with some of the characters and some of the stories that are being told in the books that you're reading. And look, the way things are going right now, the way things are going to continue to go on, we could learn to build some empathy. It's the least that we can do. But all of that is on top of our real life responsibilities. I understand that after a full day of work or school, plus exercising, plus cooking food, plus spending time with loved ones, and just letting your body rest after a long day, it can be hard to find the time to sit down and read. But think about all the time that you spend in your day just staring at your phone, scrolling through social media, scrolling through the news, scrolling through Google Chrome. All that time spent, and you're not really even doing anything with that time. Maybe it's time to replace that doom scrolling with a book. And look, I'm a busy guy. I work full time, I work out, I make videos to post on the tube, but despite that, there are a few ways that I've been able to fit reading into my very busy schedule and very busy life. All right, real talk. Seasonal depression can be no joke. I feel like when the weather gets worse outside, it's so easy for all of us to just kind of let all of our worst emotions come to surface. Well, it's starting to get warm outside and the weather is starting to feel nice on my skin, and I felt like I needed to feel exactly that same feeling while I'm inside of my own home. So I've been redecorating a little bit now that I've had some free time, and I've just been rearranging some things. I've been adding some curtains into the apartment. I've been adding some more splashes of color. I've just been making this place feel more mine because I just feel like my creativity thrives more when it has an environment to support it. You know, I feel like if my environment is constantly unorganized or if my environment doesn't match the vibes that are going on in my head, then the vibes that are going on in my head don't make it onto my actual videos or into whatever creative output I'm trying to create. So if you're someone who's been, I don't know, maybe feeling kind of down over the last couple of months through the winter, or if you're just somebody who is creative but you haven't had that spark of curiosity or creativity hit your brain in a while, maybe just rearrange your room, rearrange some furniture, decorate a little bit, add some flavor, change things up a little bit. Because when we get too comfortable and when we get comfortable being comfortable, that's where our growth stops. And we don't want that to happen. We got to keep the growth going nonstop. We keep going. We don't look back. We keep moving forward. This first option is actually my usual go-to, audiobooks. And I know that might be controversial among readers and people in the reading community and in these book talk spaces, but it's valid, okay? And I used to feel the same way about audiobooks. I used to consider it not true reading, but then I heard someone else's perspective on how audiobooks are the same as reading regular books. The only difference is visual. And you know what? My perspective kind of changed on audiobooks, especially because I really got into them. When I have access to an audiobook, I can listen to it while I work out at the gym, while I tidy up my living space, while I get ready for and drive to work, it's convenient. And in a world that moves so fast where you often don't have times to just sit down and read, this is one way to still build up that literacy and get some reading comprehension in your brain. And one thing that I had to get through my head to make me read more often was that you don't have to sit down and read and set time aside the same way you would for a movie or a TV show when it comes to picking up a book and reading. You don't need to dedicate an hour or two of your day to get through it. While it is nice to do those things, and I love to do those things, I did that thing last night. For us busy, working folk, it's not always plausible. Most days I'll pack a book or even my Kindle, which is super easy to read and carry around, and I'll put it into my work bag or I'll put it into my regular everyday carry bag. And that way, whenever I have any time throughout the day, a couple of minutes to spare, I can just pop it out, open it up, and read for a couple of minutes. Doesn't matter if it's only 1 or 2 minutes, doesn't matter if it's 5 minutes, doesn't matter if it's 10 minutes. What matters is I'm reading. And even when you're making those small dents in your reading, they go a long way, especially when you're busy, because those minutes, they can add up very fast if you're doing it every day or any chance you get where you're willing to read throughout the day. I probably would have finished some of the books that I read over the last year a lot slower if I didn't take the time every couple of minutes that I could throughout the day to pick it up and just shave a couple of pages off of the reading list. All right, now for my personal favorites and how reading them was beneficial to me. The first book that I decided to read after graduating college that I didn't have to read for an assignment was The Shao of the Wu by the RZA from the Wu-Tang Clan. And this was a short little memoir, didn't take very long to get through, but this book really got me back into the momentum of reading, and it told the story of one of the most famous producers and rappers in hip-hop history, and the Wu-Tang Clan's formation was detailed with this book. And that's one thing I think people just don't do enough, is read what you like, what you're interested in. That is the easiest way to become a reader, is reading about the things you already like, all right? Reading the classics is wonderful. Reading the things that people are recommending is wonderful, but sometimes you just gotta find what works for you. And this was something that worked for me. I was very much a big fan of the Wu-Tang Clan, so of course, when I saw a book about one of its founding members, I had to pick it up, and it was great. It was an easy read, and it really got me back into the habit of opening up a spine and looking at the pages in the fresh ink. Next up, we got Swing Time by Zadie Smith. Now, this book is actually near and dear to me specifically because I remember picking it up in a bookstore when me and my buddy Colby were walking down the street in Los Angeles, and he showed me this bookstore. I picked it up immediately because I remember having to read Zadie Smith in college, and I enjoyed her work so much so that I decided to pick up another book. And this was actually her debut novel, and reading this novel inspired me because this novel was published when she was 24 years old. I was 24 when I read it, and it really, opened my eyes a little bit about, okay, writing isn't just a game for older people. Reading isn't just a game for older people. People my age and younger can read books like this, can write books like this, and really show off their skills. And it's just a great story. Zadie Smith is freaking hilarious. If you can't see, I've got all these different Zadie Smith books just chilling in my living room because I love her writing. She's freaking awesome. Read some Zadie Smith if you haven't already. Now, this next one I found out from Dua Lipa's book club podcast, Service 95, which I highly recommend you check out if you don't know what to read because she's got amazing recommendations and she gets the authors to speak about the books that she reads. And that was Widow Basquiat by Jennifer Clement. This is another memoir all about Jean-Michel Basquiat's, so to say, widow, and her story in meeting Jean-Michel. And it's a real toxic relationship, okay? This is a warning to you lovers out there. And it's an easy, short read. I read this thing while I was on a flight, and I finished it from front to back within that flight. It's a great read, super easy, especially if you're just easing your way back into reading. Trust by Hernan Diaz. This one is a great one, okay? This one is told in 4 different parts, and each part is written in a different style. We've got a novel, we've got a memoir, we've got a notebook, we've got short stories being told that all form into one overarching story. And it's up to you to decide which of those stories you trust the most. And it's great. It's good stuff. If you've never read this is something that I would recommend right away. This one's an awesome book. I think it was a winner of a Pulitzer Prize. Yeah, right there. It says it on the cover. So you got to read this thing. This thing was awesome. Also, another book that so happened to be from Dua Lipa's Service 95 podcast. I promised that I was reading this before I found out that she had Hernan Diaz on her book club. Also, this book is what attracted Dua Lipa to her now fiance. So if you're trying to pull a baddie like Dua Lipa, open up a freaking book. The Autobiography of Malcolm X. If you can't tell, I am very inspired by a lot of the words that came out of Malcolm X's mouth. And look, when I was in school, we didn't talk a lot about Malcolm X. He was kind of taboo. If you knew, you knew, and most of us didn't know. If you want to read a story about a young boy who was misguided throughout the entire first half of his life and then went to prison for almost a decade because of the choices that he made, only to be released from prison and become one of the biggest advocates for civil rights in 1950s and the 1960s, then you need to read some Malcolm X, all right? If you don't already know who Malcolm X is, man, do yourself a favor and read through his autobiography. You won't regret it. The next two I don't have physical copies of because I listened to them by audiobook, but Assata by Assata Shakur, her memoir, riveting stuff, thrilling stuff about this young woman's true life and how she went to prison, how she escaped prison, how she fled to Cuba, and about how life was so different a couple of decades ago and how yet a lot of it remains the same. One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This by Omar El-Akkad. This one is the newest book on the list, so it is also the most current book on the list, and because of that, I think it is the most applicable to our daily lives on the list. If you haven't read this one, I would highly recommend it. Again, another easy read. I think it was less than 200 pages. But those are just the books that I've read. Of course, you've got the classics that maybe you read in high school, like Catcher in the Rye or The Things They Carried. You can read these again because I guarantee you'll have a new perspective on these books compared to when you read them when you were in high school. Because let's be real, when you're reading books in high school, who really takes away everything that they should be taken away? Half the time we're asleep in the desks, okay? I get it. I'm a teacher. I know how it goes. I was a student before. I know how it goes. But do it, man. Revisit some of the stories from high school. Revisit the stories from college. Revisit the stories from when you were a kid. Read the news stories. Read what interests you. Read what people recommend. Just read, man. Check out your local bookstores. Listen to Dua Lipa's Service 95 Book Club podcast. Reread the books that you spark noted when you were a teenager. The greatest stories are told by people who have read and who have heard the greatest stories. So go and start your story.